What is up, folks? It's another high-tech podcast episode. We are here. We are alive.
We did it.
And we did it.
Yeah, success.
What did we do? Success?
We got here. We
got here. That was our success.
Record.
We hit record. Go us. Well, it's another special episode, or as we like to call it, an interview episode, because that's the only special type of episode we have.
I was waiting there. I was like, what?
It's the only external series we've released aside from our regular episodes.
That's true.
And we got another one. People still want to talk to us. It's weird. It's crazy.
Whoop, whoop.
So really excited about this one because nobody will want to talk to us after this. No.
I always hit my mic. I have to edit my mic out of things so often. I just slammed my mic. Everybody's, you're probably going to know because I'm going to have edited the sound, but Josh laughed.
Yeah, it'll be fine. But we brought it to light, so now it's hard to edit it out. Yeah, go us. So anyway, this interview is exciting and awesome. We get to interview Steve Muth.
You got it.
Right? Nailed it.
Yeah,
cool.
100%.
Okay, I realized as I was going through it, I was like, I didn't look at the notes close enough. We interviewed Steve Muth, president and CEO, founder of VoiceThread, a tool that we already did an episode on. And again, disclaimer, spoiler alert, if you did not listen to that episode, stop it. Go listen to it right now. Okay? Go listen to it.
And where should they listen to it, Josh? Where do they go to get that?
They can listen to it at hightechpod.us or US, depending on how you pronounce that.
Because we fancy,
URL.
Also known as cheap. That was the cheap username.
That was
URL.
the cheap URL. Go check that out and and listen to episode. I don't actually remember what the number is, but who cares? Wait, we just released it while we're recording this one, right? 23?
Literally today, it came out, episode 23. Yep.
Okay, so by the time this episode comes out, you have been out for a little while, so you have no excuse. Go listen to that episode about VoiceThread, listen to our breakdown, and then come back, and then you get to hear Steve. You only get to hear it after you've heard about the tool the first time.
Josh is the disciplinarian, folks. If you want a hug, come to me, but if you need to know where you need to be, he's here to tell you.
I'm rough, okay? So, anyway, super awesome episode. I'm really pumped about this. He gave quite some wisdom in this one, so... Without further ado, I'm not going to talk any longer. Let's check it out. Our interview with Steve Muth from VoiceThread.
Will and Josh here, excited to host this week. President and co-founder of the company VoiceThread, Steve Muth. Steve is with us representing the company. He does have a co-founder, Ben Papel, who has helped in the process, of course, of not only starting but leading the product. Today, we're going to hear a little bit about what's come behind and how we got to today with the VoiceThread, but also get a little bit of personality behind the product. Steve, are you here with us?
Yes, I am. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I really appreciate you not taking a nap. I see the hammock in the back, but
that's it. Yeah, some people have a treadmill. I have a hammock.
Ever use it in a meeting? You just show up in the middle of a meeting like, all right.
Normally I put it away, but sometimes I've forgotten and it's out, and it does usually elicit some kind of response from people. Because apparently the world hasn't caught up with me yet. I don't understand why everyone doesn't have a hammock in their office. I think you have a chair. Why don't you have a hammock?
Yeah, people should just be used to you like laying out on the hammock in video the second it
Absolutely.
I see he's got the AirPods, so he he just needs to click start and sit down, and he's ready to go.
Perfect meeting.
Yep.
I'm a firm believer in the Pomodoro technique. So if you need those 5 minutes between,
exactly.
10 sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Movement is key. You got to move, but moving, you also have to nap. I think that changes in your physical body throughout the day are really important. You got to get up from your desk, you got to walk around, you got to take naps, you got to just change things. And you'll find when you do that, you tend to sort of get through some difficult problems much faster than if you just sit there staring at a screen. You have to learn to walk away when you're doing that. It's not good.
Hey, sometimes we use it just to like cool down from like an argument or whatever, but that walk, that physical step away process is really helpful.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I mean, here's that little pedagogical side rant, but most of our students, the most they get is between classrooms, which is a big bummer. But
it really is a big bummer. No, I heard about, I'm gonna mangle the name, or forget it altogether. But it was a professor who did some research on this by giving his lectures while walking outside with people. So he would go for walks with people, and he studied it and he compared it to his standard lectures, and retention was like something like 40% higher. It was something
Ooh,
crazy. It
oh,
was amazing.
Ooh.
So not everybody can do it. If you're maybe in McGill, that'd be a problem in the winter. But for a lot of places, I think you could really get away with it. So yeah,
well,
walking.
it sounds like there's an innovation in there, like walking thread or something. Like it sounds
Yeah,
like there's an
Yeah.
opportunity to cultivate
absolutely.
walking lectures.
Yeah, absolutely. Walking, walking, walking. The walking school. All right, you heard it here first. That's the next thing.
Exactly. Is that like band name we have to call it
Yeah,
or something?
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Totally.
Trademarks now.
That's wonderful. Well, again, we're just so happy to have you with you. Thank you for taking the time with us today. Let's dig in a little bit on this voice
Sure.
thread idea. So,
Yeah.
what drove you to start the company? And you were telling us before, 1 year ago, 2 years, how long ago?
15 years ago. Yeah, it's
That's the
crazy.
grandfather of ed tech.
It
Yeah.
really is. No, we've seen so many companies come and go, and I don't want to claim to be a business genius because I think there's a lot of luck involved. But the path that we chose early on, when everybody was running around telling us, "Oh, you need to go get venture funding, raise a bunch of money," and we were struggling with that for a little bit, and we had to make a decision. It was like a fork in the road. Either you basically spend half the company's energy trying to raise money, or you put that right into the development and create a
Hmm.
product that people will actually pay for. And so we went that direction, and it was a tough couple of years at the beginning, but it's proved to be really kind of wonderful. We survived, and then after about 4 years, we've just been profitable ever since. It's not explosive growth, but
Great.
it's very reliable, and it's created a pace of growth at the company that's also easy to manage. So we hire people as we can, and we just get a little better every year. And it's a really nice. I feel like that story isn't told enough because people act like there's only one way to be in tech, and that's to
Yeah.
raise bazillions of dollars and play this little game, kabuki theater. And I really think it's unfortunate because it distracts founders from the reason why they started in the first place, which
Sure.
was to solve a problem and to build a company around that.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, that's how we survived. But as far as like what was the original idea, well, interestingly enough, it had nothing to do with education. We
Hmm.
really thought we were just playing around, and we just thought that we might be able to create something like a Flickr where you could a group of people could record the audio stories that are behind shared evocative media. And by evocative
Hmm.
media, it doesn't mean good. It means it's evocative to you. And in small groups, people have shared evocative media. It's like something that is meaningful to that group. That's why the seed picture that launched it all was a family picture, which is hilariously funny when you look at it, but you don't know what's going on because you're
Mm.
not from that family. So it was my family, and I shared it with my family members I'd made a little flash application to do this, and they recorded their version of what was going on in the picture. And then we sent that example out to a couple people, and we're just asked the simple question: here's the digital artifact. Now here it is after the audio stories were added. Was value added?
Hmm.
And the answer from
Hmm.
everybody was absolutely. And so once we got that feedback, we're like, okay, well that's neat, but what do you do with this? And so we just did a little iterative, further development. We launched like a little alpha site, and then I don't know who discovered us, but basically 95% of our feedback all came from educators.
Wow.
And so we were like, well, what's that about? And people would say things like, I've basically been waiting for 10 years for somebody to make this. I knew it was going to happen. Like this is what they wanted. And then so there was that. And then there was the odd thing of they all had different use cases.
Okay.
So that was another really odd thing. So like kindergarten narratives. Like, so you're in a kindergarten and, you make a little art project on Earth Day. And in the past, what was done, it's like, a standard part of kindergarten curriculum. The student will make a piece of art. The teacher then acts as a scribe and writes down a sentence or two about what is going on, what the student says about it. So what a VoiceThread allowed them to do was basically stop being a middleman, and get out of the way of the student. And the student doesn't record, half a sentence. They talk for like minutes, because as
Right.
young students they may not be able to write, but they have no problem talking and telling stories.
You
So
get them asking
that
a
was
question.
absolutely. So that was like one use case, and then somebody else is using it to lecture on currency trading. What is that?
Right.
How they could be more different users, and they were using it in different ways, but it was the exact same tool, no different. So there's a technology. It's not a technology comparison, but it's sort of a concept or a tool concept comparison, which is PowerPoint, where it's also a tool where it's used in kindergartens, it's used at Department of Defense, and for currency trading. All of them are using the exact same tool, but they're just doing it in different ways, often very badly, but still that same idea applies, right? They figure out how best to use it for them. And
Right.
we all like to make fun of PowerPoint, but the original idea is actually a really good one, which is
Yeah.
why it's around, which is it does help people. It's actually very similar to VoiceThread in that they thought to themselves, there is another way of communicating information and ideas that will be more accessible because it combines visuals in interesting new ways. And for people who are more visual, it can be a helpful way of explaining a complex idea. So, good idea. Obviously, like every tool in the world, I mean, fire, does terrible things and does wonderful things. So it's just a tool. It's, people can do with it whatever they want. But
The
it's
wheel
sort of
can take
similar.
people to the emergency room, and the wheel can also
Yeah.
take people to Burger King. Like,
And it caused the reason why people go to the emergency
Yeah, I was
room.
gonna say
Exactly.
both are related in my mind too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love you mentioned that the idea of the picture, though, the first picture kind of thing, and you're like, all right, there's context to this. Like, that makes me think of the boxes and boxes and boxes of family photos
Yep.
that have like maybe 6 or 7 names written on the
Yep.
back, maybe the
Yeah.
year, and then
That's
you have
it.
nothing else,
And
right?
in that box, there's probably about 5 that are truly fascinating. There's a fascinating story behind
Mhm.
whatever is going on in there.
Mhm.
And because of that lack of context that gets captured in an audio story, it's a shame because the stories are lost to history. Whereas if they had been captured at a certain point, they wouldn't be lost to history. And that was the original idea. So it was interesting to us and a big surprise to find all the feedback came from educators.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like the whole that while it makes total sense as we're talking about it now, that would be kind of the initial idea that inspires some of this stuff. That would have not been what I thought of when I
Yeah,
was thinking of it, because Will and I are so embedded in education that like
right,
immediately, and specifically for the two of us, like
right.
online and like this blended
Yeah,
education, it's like immediately like, oh yeah, this makes sense here.
yeah,
But it very
yeah.
much that original idea of just kind of the context of this image describing it,
Could you imagine
really
if
you
it was
can
like
kind of see it in the DNA of your tool, which
Could
is
you
really
imagine if it
cool.
was like New York stock traders that were the first folks that got it? Like how your product
Yeah,
would be
how
different if
different we'd be over here still, playing with fire, and
Yeah.
stock
We,
traders would be
we would
releasing
have
great
like a
content.
hundred. We'd have like 100 customers, and we'd be charging each of them $100,000 a year.
Exactly. Now, next question, kind of throw it out here, right? So that's kind of what drove you to start it, the idea. But like talking about if you could, how I always package this with people, right, is like I hate the metaphor, but it works. This like elevator kind of pitch why you're
Yeah,
so passionate, right? Like, so
yeah,
what makes
yeah.
you now so passionate about what VoiceThread is doing?
I think it's interesting because it dovetails with there's a lot of cultural things that are going on now with equity and accessibility. I didn't perceive of myself as somebody in an accessibility community. It's only with years and decades of hindsight do I look back and go, oh, well, clearly I had a learning disability. I was a terrible student, an absolutely terrible student. However, interestingly enough, I've never had an issue kind of learning anything. I kind of I've never, not that I'm not particularly good at math, but anything that I set out to do, I was able to do. I've succeeded at everything except for being a student. So what is
I know
that?
some of those.
Right? And so the question is, so what I've discovered is that um, there are people like me, and they may not
Hmm.
look like me, but their minds work. They have a cognitive difference that is good, that has gone unrecognized. And so, what drives me personally is knowing that there are millions and millions of people like me who are out there who want to forget want, who need to connect with others to learn collaboratively, human to human, like listening, arguing, fighting, all of that good stuff that happens in really great like seminar classrooms. And so if I feel that that's what's necessary for me, and then you go and take just an honest look at educational experiences today online, it's laughable. There's none of that going on. It's a silent, cold experience where you're we have replaced voice with text notifications. Uh, it's pathetic. I mean, that's the only honest way to look at it. And I think that's my other background in a prior life was an inventor, and that's what you do when you start looking at something is you come at it with fresh eyes and you just question the fundamentals,
Hmm.
which is very different from somebody if you grow up. That's why inventors oftentimes come from outside of something because they're not the frog in the hot water. They're the frog outside of the water, and they're like, wait a second.
Why are you
That's
doing that?
yeah, what are you doing here? So there's an opportunity as an outsider who wasn't from academia to look at it and
Hmm.
say, this is really broken. It's really broken. So that's what gets me excited is um, the opportunity to fix that, to address those problems. And what gets me doubly excited is finally the academic world and brain research is catching up with all of this. So,
Hmm.
so I am very confident about the future is sort of on our side. Like we have some real tailwinds because this is no longer like my opinion, how I like things. It's becoming standard. It started with, and it actually started a while ago. Unfortunately, it hasn't gotten the traction it deserves, but things like the CAST organization with
Yep.
UDL and the Universal Design for Learning,
Mhm.
this has been around for a while, and yet to this day, I continue to see the principles violated constantly. And you're like, how is this? This is not new. This isn't like last year's brain science. This is 25 years old.
Yep.
Some of the first things. So the fact that this continues on and we don't create these really rich learning experiences, learning environments when we have the tools now to do it, not just VoiceThread, but it's a mix. There's a whole bunch of things that you can
Mhm.
do, and so I'm impatient, and I feel like we've waited long enough. And more importantly, forget we students have waited long enough, and it's really demoralizing. You know, during the pandemic, my kids were at home, and I was watching them and do things like go onto a Zoom call with 25 other students and uh, for 2 hours listen to each other give live presentations on Zoom. And it was driving me insane. I was like, you're kidding me, right? Like,
It hurts when you know better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. If you didn't know better, fine. But I'm like, guys, if you would just make it a voice thread so that the students can practice rather than getting 5 minutes out of a 2 hour class. And because the class is so long, because of course you have to include everybody, and of course it means that you've got to shorten the time for question and answers. There's no real deep thinking or peer discussion going on. Instead, it's just this rapid fire thing, which makes everybody bored and anxious all at the same time. How is that possible? It's like the trifecta of like, wait, everybody's really anxious and they're incredibly bored. Whereas all they had to do was make it a voice thread, break them up into
Yeah.
groups. So it was only 5 people only 5 presentations you had to watch. However, what you then had to do was have a conversation with those people afterwards. And suddenly everybody can relax. You can do it when you want. There's none of that pressure, that anxiety. You can spend much more time, whether you're commenting or creating the damn thing, practicing it. So when you know what's possible, and then you see these practices going on, it does drive you a little crazy.
Yeah, exactly. That's all. If I could like have a loud choir behind me and give you an amen in that, I would.
That's what we
And
still need is a little sound deck for
yeah, we
You
need
sound
sound
do,
effects.
effects.
Oh,
yeah.
That's the
I
thing
thought you were
we're
going to say a
missing.
live choir. I agree. We do need a live choir. Not, like just behind each of us in the episode. Every time something great said, they come up. Okay, we'll hold that for another idea later.
Yeah, and in our episodes, it would be like, yeah. So Steve's episode would be like every other minute.
Yeah, it'd be every other minute. So, but no, I like Steve. That's great. And for context too, like we give this in our episode for those who are listening. Will definitely has more of a background with your tool VoiceThread than I do. Will's the one who introduced it to me. Which, if I had $1 for every time I said Will introduced me to a tool,
We would finally buy that soundboard.
I'd be much richer. The thing I think I was so impressed about with VoiceThread as I was taking a look at it is just that context. You guys make it very easy within the tool of adding in this media and then giving availability to start generating conversation. And then even to your point, like if you want to have those Zoom sessions, right? Like VoiceThread works well to get the conversation going, get groups out, make media, and have that more around discourse of the actual presentations, like actually being able to get that valuable discussion instead of 5 minutes each doing their presentation and one person getting a question the entire time. Just so you're not alone, Will and I half of our podcast is just us being annoyed that this stuff isn't happening.
Oh, good. Okay, it's not just me.
Half. I was being generous. Very good though.
I'm going to be a little selfish here with question 3. I'm going to be honest. With question 3, we usually get to asking you about top user stories, anecdotes, and I just feel like if you haven't heard them from me before, Steve, and I don't even remember if I had them in the original episode or not, but there's 3 that really come to mind of my experience using using VoiceThread that like, wow, it can do this, right? You've already shared even at the beginning of the episode the idea of the kindergartners versus currencies or whatever. During the pandemic, I had a Tai Chi instructor turn to using VoiceThread
So cool.
to have the students perform their techniques and their forms and demo and like, wow. A Spanish instructor who said before that, not that she was like antithetical to online instruction, but she couldn't visualize how Spanish could be taught online. And she actually took one of your free courses on Spanish language instruction from one of your folks. And I think, I can't remember his name, but
George?
I've taken a couple. Yeah, George.
He's awesome.
Great at helping facilitate those and deliver them.
Yeah.
But that was a huge success. She went on to like get some grants and stuff and do more courses online as a result of that turn.
Yeah.
And then we had a whole portfolio series of like master's students who were trying to finish up their degree kind of thing, that kind of step in the process. And they had to do this whole kind of like narrated, usually live presentation, but for COVID, they needed something to deliver it to a lot of people asynchronously. And then VoiceThread ended up being the success point there. So I just want to make sure you got those in your toolbox, but
those are great. I love all of them. I have already seen versions of all of them, right? So awesome. For your Tai Chi class, my favorite is I had an online dance class, which sounds insane, and they were studying disco, and it was just hilarious. Because I thought I would, if you said, "Oh, we're going to teach dance class online," I would have laughed like, "It's impossible. That's a joke. Like you can't do." And then you watch it and you go, he totally did. He taught a dance class, and all the students are in their living rooms, doing their moves
with a lamp or a friend or whatever they got.
Exactly. And clearly everybody had a really good time. And they did it without scheduling that Zoom session and getting to practice as often as they wanted. So like their dance wasn't out there until they were ready, right? Until it was what they wanted to submit. So a lot less anxiety, no scheduling. I mean, yeah. So I have versions of every one that you mentioned. So there are patterns. But one thing I'll point out, and you probably have run into this because you had exposure to the tool over time, is we're always discovering things that were not designed, but were like affordances that sort of appear and these benefits that appear after doing something. And I'll just give you one example, which is, some 14 years ago when we first started, people were not very familiar and had a lot of trouble configuring their microphones to record online. It was really
Oh
tricky.
yeah.
So
What?
there was a lot of failures there, and we wanted people to catch those failures before they sent it off to somebody, because otherwise they would just get this audio comment where there's no audio. So we wanted to prevent that. So we said to ourselves, um, let's play the audio back for you automatically, whether you want to or not. The moment you click stop, we upload it to a service and then we play it back to you to let you know. So if there's no sound, you know immediately, oh, something went wrong. Let me delete this and figure this out. So that's why it was developed, for to solve this technical problem. But it's created this complete different impact on the learning experience, in that what happened is, when you use VoiceThread, you end up hearing your voice a lot. If you make audio comments, you're hearing your voice a lot, and that's very unusual unless you are a podcaster or in media or something like that. We tend to never hear our own voices, and a couple of things are universal when you do hear your voice. You don't like it. No one likes their own voice, right? Unless you're like a really egotistical celebrity. Nobody likes their own voice. And in fact, students will say that. They'll write a review of VoiceThread and be like, I hated that tool because I hated the sound of my own voice. But they'll follow it up with, and because of that, I had to record and re-record my comment 5 times to get it right. And meanwhile, if you're an educator, you're all thinking the same thing. Like, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to record and re-record your voice 5 times. And so without the teacher having to tell people to do it, the students do it themselves. It's like a positive use of peer pressure. They don't want to come off sounding stupid. And so they end up getting to do something you don't get to do in a live meeting, which is to edit what you said. And so, I joke, VoiceThread, we should put up as one of our taglines, will make you sound much smarter than you really are. Because it's not something that you get to do in real life. You just say whatever it is and you make a mistake. That's it. It's done. But on a VoiceThread, I use it every day, probably record, let's just say 10 or 15 comments a day. Half of them I start listening to, and I immediately realize I missed something, wasn't succinct enough, and out of respect for my audience, I'm going to delete that comment and I'm going to re-record it. So I have learned that that's not a failure. In fact, that's an affordance that I should take advantage of out of respect for my audience, and it makes me sound like I actually know what I'm talking about. So that's
how many times do we ask the students to do that with papers? You know what I mean? They won't do it with the paper, but they will do it when they hear themselves.
Because of peer pressure. So that's an example of, you build something for one reason, but then you realize, ooh, this is has a really positive impact outside of it. So that's another sort of why I think I have the best job on earth, because it's fun to discover those things and then try to reverse engineer them and be like, okay, well, what's going on here? Why is this a negative? Is it a positive? and what's going on here? And I think that's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's cool. I mean, and I've been right there as well. Yeah, you record yourself, and I don't think either Will or I like the way we sound as we have to listen back to each other. I don't know.
Turns out.
I'm pretty sure when we started this out and he's like, I offered a little bit to edit. He's like, yeah, you can edit. He was really fast to say that. You can edit.
You do the editing. So we'll have to listen to himself all the time, every time. But to the point, like, just the cool environment that you guys have made where you're able to do a lot of this audio and video commenting back and forth and have to work through that and edit that. It fits so well into education, not just in the online space, but in, face-to-face classrooms as activities. And I think that's just, I keep coming back to this because it was Will who introduced me. I had to keep having these moments of being like, oh yeah, this would be awesome in this space or this space. Like, we could fit this in here really cool. Will and I seem to come back to martial arts for some reason every time we talk about how to use VoiceThread. I don't know why, but now on that note of kind of solving these problems and stuff you're working with, we always have to ask this question because Will and I like features. So are there any new or fun features you guys are working on, and we're going to limit ourselves because we made the mistake of not doing this before. And we get a lot of features. So like maybe one or two, just ones that you can share, kind of things you're working on, problems you're trying to solve.
Sure. We have big things, but I don't think they have what you have in mind. So like a new mobile app that's going to have new assignments and,
That's cool.
be much
that's
more
cool. I like
reliable.
that.
So that's stuff that end users like, but enterprise users really like. There's that. There'll be next year an entirely new website. So it's built from the ground up in a modern framework, so much more mobile friendly. It will be unifying all of our client apps. So we're going to move away from right now. We have a version of VoiceThread that specifically works for screen readers. And instead, we're going to have just one because the new version will work with screen readers. So that's been a big, goal of ours for a long time. So depending on your group, you may think those are big deals. You may not think they're big deals. But as far as like actual features, probably the biggest one is going to be the ability to include your Zoom state during a comment. So right now, if you're looking at a voice thread, and you know how you can annotate on them. So we're recording as you talk. We record what you're looking at. If you click and draw on it, we're capturing all the X and Y's in a stream so that we can recreate those annotations using math on playback. And we also record what slide you're looking at. So you can go from one slide that has a video on it, go to frame 472, draw on it, go to the next slide that also has a video, go to a different keyframe in it, draw on it, go then to a PowerPoint slide. You can do all of this in one comment, and we record all of that as a single stream that gets played back so that when you watch these comments, people often think they're watching a screencast because that's what it feels like. But there's no screencasting software or anything like that. So, but the one piece that's been missing is Zoom state. So if we capture the Zoom state, it would allow you to open up and zoom in. So say you had an architectural drawing that had, a lot of real minutia and detail. It doesn't make sense. You can't talk about those details if you're too far away. You have to zoom in. So we're going to add that to the click stream. So it'll be even more like a comment is a screencast. It'll feel like that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Really, those are the things that am I thinking about that? In all my years handling the product, I haven't had someone ask about that, right? But I can now imagine a subset of my users that could have used it more because that feature would have supported. That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, just a seamless kind of comment environment that you're creating is really cool.
That's the idea. Yeah. We wanted somebody, sometimes I describe it as we want our comments to feel like you're sitting behind, you're standing next to somebody watching whatever they do, like with a video camera. And that's what gives you the sense of presence. And to wave my science fiction magic wand, in the future, what we would like it to be is really like a hologram in that we want to get as much personal presence of that person. If you could hear them breathing, their chair creaking, the sounds of the birds in the background, or a train going by, all of these things are actually really important inputs to helping us feel connected with the people that we're interacting with. So the more of those that we can add into the comment, we think the better. So we'll always be looking for more things that we can add.
And that's awesome, because I think that's the thing, like I've commented on in our episode when we talked about this, like some of the stuff that VoiceThread does, and even to like what you're doing there. So I'm at an institution that does not have VoiceThread, and I'm going to use this as a plug to get it. No, for the institution. No.
Hashtag not a sponsor.
Hashtag not a sponsor. And if my institution's listening, we should get it. Just the seamlessness of that working, because I've worked with faculty members and instructors who trying to do stuff like that in the tools that we have, they have to use like 4 different things to make that happen. And for them, it's overwhelming to even think about the concept of creating something like that. And then for the student, it's a disjointed experience because they don't really know how to do all those things. So like it ends up being kind of a little bit of a haphazard solution. And what you're talking about right there is just the seamlessness of how you bring all those media together and allow for people to kind of move around them and comment on them.
As
creates
an instructional,
such an easier experience for that interaction to happen.
as an
Yeah.
instructional designer, it changes the prompt and the assignment
Yeah.
from here are these 16 steps to complete the project to use
Right.
VoiceThread.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And
I don't have
okay,
to.
there's a
Yeah.
couple
There's some
steps for
guidance for
VoiceThread,
sure,
but
I
but
mean,
yeah, you don't have to insert all the stuff that we do, which is all this absurd guidance for click here,
yeah.
here, 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 and then if this
Yeah.
doesn't work, do this. Like
Yeah.
what you
It's
guys are doing is
unfortunate.
creating that environment.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that too much enterprise software is bought off of like a checklist, right?
Mm.
Must have this, and that. And I've never seen, and they really should have on the checklist a value for does the technology disappear?
Ooh.
Because
Mm.
it's what you don't see. Like if you we have gotten the feedback from people because we were worried. We're like we see some people are using it in the institution, but they haven't taken us up on training. And when we contact them, they're like, well, we don't need any training. We got it. Like, and that's the idea that like that is the goal you want to get to where, if I had to pick a sort of a conceptual like Hall of Fame tool, it's the number two pencil.
Mm.
Because when it sits there on a desk, there's no sort of cognitive tension around like you're like, well, how the hell am I going to use this thing? No, you learned how to use that when you were in kindergarten, and now you use it differently today, and you know much more things that you can do with it. But the tool is identical, right? And so there's a huge benefit in having that one tool instead of the five, and making sure that also this is a really important point is change management at a company when they change the product, there has to be such respect for the end user because while we're all sort of techie people, so we love the idea of new features and change. But even us techie people feel the same way. Please don't change my UI gratuitously. I have invested so much in learning that the back button is over here and you record here. So I see this happen at other companies where they will, hire a designer and they're just like, well, I've got to change everything. So they change everything. But if you really look closely, like it kind of does the same thing. You just made me, lose my entire investment in learning that tool. So it's really important that you can see this in companies over time. Do they have a deep respect for the user? Because if they do, they won't do that to them. Because you shouldn't do that. That's an empathy thing. Like understand. Like I know you want to show off. That's nice, but there's this end user, they have invested a lot in learning and getting really comfortable so that the technology can in fact disappear. And then you come along and you completely change how it works for very little benefit. And meanwhile, it's a huge cost to do all that relearning. So
Well, that just reminds me a little bit of I might be botching this, but to the extent of like what it took them to make a pen work in space when they really could have
yeah,
just used a
the
pencil, and
pencil.
I think they did.
Yeah,
I think that was
yeah,
the end solution. I don't know,
yeah,
but like that's what
yeah.
I imagine. It's like,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, let's make a pencil or a pen work in anti-gravity.
That's
Well,
it in a nutshell. It's in a
maybe you could just use
nutshell.
the pen.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, this
Yeah,
has been fantastic. Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
seriously.
Steve.
well, it was a
We
lot of
really
fun for
appreciate you
me.
taking the time with us. This interview, of course, we want folks to go back to and hear our entire episode on VoiceThread, but we really do encourage folks to, of course, reach out on Twitter, reach out through, the communications on the website, but also even just reach out to myself or Josh. Like we're all willing to speak to what this tool can do and how it might meet your use case. In the meantime, we're going to kick this off in just a second. Josh and I are going to do a little debrief. And otherwise, thank you so much again, Steve,
Yeah,
for being
thanks,
with
man.
us.
Oh, guys, it was a real pleasure.
Evocative media. He said that several times. Equity, accessibility. Steve really took us deep that way, didn't he? Like, it was just a lot of...
He likes
Wow.
He likes the deep words, man. He likes the,
It was...
he takes it to a different level.
We weren't talking about ice cream and cotton candy. Like, we got into some references there about, the caste system with universal design for learning. It was really interesting to hear Steve's thoughts, some of the kindergarten, impact and how VoiceThread's being used there. Like, I really, really appreciate kind of the different experiences we got to hear from Steve there.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear like how the tool started, where it like came out of, which was just that, like you said, the evocative media concept,
Right.
like this idea of just like very much like a classic, like how do you describe stories and like how do you give context to image and to video, in like this thread in a way that we talk. I think that's interesting. It's like it's based off of this concept, right? That like there's a certain experience we have and we talk with people or we see people describe things.
Yep.
That we lose when it's just like a PowerPoint slide on Zoom and they talk about it, like where you can't have this back and forth in the same way.
Well,
and it's hard to do that in an online realm, so that's why VoiceThread is helpful.
Yeah.
That they give you kind of this continuous place to take advantage of the time that you have to be able to come in and converse or comment on things and do stuff. It's just really interesting. It's a cool concept that's kind of led to this evolution of a very helpful tool that handles media and presentation content and interactions with that differently in the digital space.
I find it really interesting that this kind of came up, from a family picture thing. Like he's saying, we built one, I put a family picture in, I wanted people to, but the experience he was trying to cultivate out of it, like that's not what I necessarily do with family pictures. Like maybe when we got married, we had our wedding pictures, we showed a lot of people the wedding pictures, right? But like, I can't tell you besides then, 7 years ago, that I've like pulled some pictures out and like, hey dude, let's talk about these pictures. But if I go to a museum...
What do you mean? I do that all the time.
Oh, my bad. Yep. You don't do it with me. Yeah. Aren't we friends?
Well, no. Well, we do it sometimes. You don't remember.
I just don't.
It's,
that checks out. I don't remember.
Because I have so many family photos.
So many family photos. So, like, when you go to a museum, though, what that really makes me think of is, like, when I enjoy museums. I enjoy art, statues, etc. So you sit there and you talk about it, or you ask questions like, what happened to that statue, or where did it come from, or who... Those are the things Steve wanted VoiceThread to capture, and he started it with a family photo. Now we see it happening in so many different, subject matters and specialties and things like that he did it. It's just really encouraging to me. Like, you had that basic idea, wanted to cultivate that conversation, and it's really working. I love it.
The byproduct of its effects on education that you can't anticipate in the beginning is like, okay, the application is, while you're talking about how do you take that family photo and you get that experience and have this evocative media idea where you can, describe it, have conversations around it in different ways, leads to, oh, well, in education, there's how many times do we have to show or teach something or walk through something that's so much easier to do in person, but we've struggled to find ways to do it in a digital environment. He's creating a tool that you can now pull all of these things together and create this piece, like the side effects that he didn't even anticipate. Yeah. Because even the stuff like we talked about in our episode of how to use VoiceThread is clearly like not the first thing on his mind when he was designing VoiceThread. Like the stuff we're talking about where integrating slides into steps and walking through and showing stuff like katas and info, like none of that was in the base. So it was just really interesting to see how like that's evolved for him, and I think like his perspective of how something like this can provide a better experience especially when it comes to this concept of what we do with education online or in a digital space. And I'm glad he shots were fired at the Zoom experience that his kids had.
I was just thinking that.
Could
you imagine
how many? Yeah, like it's how many stories have we heard like this? And then I hear people go like, well, online education doesn't work. And it's like, well, no, you're right. The weird haphazard crap that they called online education in this period didn't work. But people like Steve and other tools and spaces out there are giving tools to people to be able to do things that are way different and actually can create new experiences and actually have just as valuable learning experiences in a digital space.
Yeah, the only other thing that really stood out to me that I loved, and I've seen it in action, was that Steve brought up accessibility. Steve brought up equity. And as an end user who has had to kind of check the boxes and make sure it's accessible, go through the VPAT, that kind of stuff for adopting the ed tech, I don't remember the URL, but they have like a web version of the platform that only promotes accessible content. So like if you go to, it's like udl.voicethread.com or something. I can't recall exactly, but it's really simple like that, right? And it brings up a whole different platform that a screen reader could read, right?
Yeah.
You can't. It's never going to read a picture unless you have alt text. It's never. There's things that there's always a limitation with that.
Obviously, there's still going to always be limitations.
If Josh and I have both seen the platform, if you ever get in there and you see it, you're going to know like immediately there's a lot of visual content. It's intended to be visual, right? But Steve and the team have had that in their mind for quite some time, that they need to also reach all students. And, there's some honesty there. It's great. You can't fix it today or tomorrow, but that they've got it on the track record or on their planning to make sure that it is as accessible and equitable as possible. Big old, 2 thumbs up from me. Like I just really appreciate hearing that from the leadership, and having seen some of the things they've already accomplished in that space is really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and I'm hoping, because he mentions in the interview and when we were talking to him that like they're working on this new interface that's going to bring together some of what they've been doing in those areas of accessibility with their current one. So I'm hoping they kind of bring those two things together, because the more we can get closer to the actual interface just in general being more accessible, the better off we are. So I'm glad they're acknowledging those places where they're trying to work on it, and they're doing it. Again, you do it as much as you can, because at the same time, like we've joked about this in many episodes, when you're doing video content, there's only like so much we can do to make it as accessible to everyone as possible. It's the natural medium of video. There's always going to be things that you struggle with or have to work with, but I like how they're creatively finding, like the story he's talking about people signing and stuff like that, in the tool. Like they're finding creative ways to like use VoiceThread in different ways for people who can't find it anywhere else. So hats off to another great tool, another great person from the team. And I think like if anybody's listening, like for me, what reinforces this is just like everybody we've talked to about this, from VoiceThread to other interviews we've done, like the people who are running these tools do genuinely care about how these are being used in education. And Steve is clearly passionate about good learning experiences and other people and his kids not having to experience the crap that they've seen in Zoom sessions or areas like that. So for anybody looking at VoiceThread, like they genuinely have a real purpose behind wanting to make education better. And so anytime a tools like that, like we want to support it as much as possible, because they're trying to get better experiences for students.
That's a wrap, folks. Interview 5 in the books on VoiceThread with Steve Muth. We really appreciate him taking the time. Thank you again, Steve. Please do head to our website. Make sure you check out the interview resources. Go check out the old episode. Share it with friends. Share it with folks, because we want to make sure that these tools are out there and being used by our educators. If you would, hit us up on Twitter. Connect with us there. Ask us any questions that you'd like to hear in the regular episodes, but also make sure you follow the other folks.
How do they find us? How do they find us, Will?
I think
what's our thing?
It's twitter.com/hightechpodcast.
Yeah, or at High Tech Podcast.
Right, that's the thing.
Right?
Yeah.
That's our thing. That's our handle.
You can also search us on Google,
so
Apple, Spotify. Please follow, subscribe, and all the good things. All right. Until next time. See ya.
See ya.